The clip you just watched has been going viral because people are not satisfied with the general consensus on what this strange cloud-like thing actually is. The most popular explanation I've seen is that this is a scud cloud. Scud clouds differ from regular clouds because they form when the air is so humid that it can't wait until it's high up in the atmosphere to condensate. So condensation occurs below the rest of the clouds or under deck, and the process continues as the air rises and cools, forming these vertical, wispy looking like scud clouds. So people were quick to point out, when I Google scud cloud, it does not look like this. Despite their irregular shape, scud clouds still look fluffy like a common cloud. Meanwhile, in their caption, the poster of this video describes the formation as moving like liquid metal. Could this just be a unique looking scud cloud detached from another type of cloud? Is there a better explanation, if any at all? I don't know, let me know what you think.
It's a cool autumn evening and Emily is babysitting for a family friend, and the father, before he heads out, reminds her, there's a TV down in the basement if you get bored after the kids go to bed. Emily says, okay, yeah, thank you so much, have a good time, whatever. So the dad leaves, and then it's a few hours later, the kids are asleep, and Emily decides she's gonna go downstairs to relax. The only thing is that she can't bring herself to relax because there's this creepy looking statue in the corner of the room. She tries her best to ignore it, but it's so distracting, it's just unsettling her more and more. So at one point she's just staring at it and she's like, screw you, you weirdo, and she's even considering like covering it up with a blanket or something because it was just really giving her the creeps. So she's looking at this thing and they're almost having like a staring contest, and then all of a sudden she's completely startled by her phone ringing. It was just the children's father. He was checking in, asking how things are going, and Emily says, yeah, the kids are fine, but do you mind if I just cover up your clown statue that's in the corner of the room here in the basement, because it's really freaking me out. Then there was this brief pause and the father just says, what statue?
Here are some random facts that you may or may not find unsettling. More than 80 million bacteria are exchanged during a single kiss. A person's head can remain conscious up to approximately 20 seconds post-decapitation. The catacombs of Paris house the remains of around 6 million people. For a long time, doctors didn't know that babies could feel pain. By a long time, I mean some doctors believed this into the 1980s. This is a horned lizard. Cute, right? Yeah, well, they squirt blood from their eyes as a defense mechanism. When taking into consideration each day of the year, the chance that you will die on your birthday is 6.7%. And that is higher than every other day. It's World Oceans Day, so in honor of that, let's look at some more underwater creatures that make me very uncomfortable. This dude's called a basket star, so what they do is they extend their weird little branch-like arms to catch their prey. Seems pretty cool, right? No. This freak of nature is called a bobbit worm, and they average about 1 meter in length. But the largest on record was 3 meters long. I think that one was more than enough, thank you. Their bite has been known to cut their prey clean in half, and they may bite humans should you get too close. I don't want to imagine what that thing would be able to do to my foot. Not that I would ever be caught dead scuba diving anyway. In my last Sea Creatures video, I got a lot of recommendations to look up the wolf eel, and I thought, well, it can't get any worse than the moray eel, right? Right? Turns out I was wrong.
Let's look at some photos that do nothing but fuel my submechanophobia. So submechanophobia is the fear of man-made submerged objects. If you're not sure if you have the phobia, does this image make you incredibly uncomfortable? Me too. Let's move on. Now, I don't even know what it is about this image that creeps me out. It's not the fact that a plane crashed. It's not the fact that it's a plane. I guess the murky water adds to it, but I'm not sure if my brain is just subconsciously like, ew, because it's not supposed to be there, but all I know is that I hate it. This image looks as if my submechanophobia and thalassophobia had a horrendous love child that just should never have been born. I don't even know if this picture counts, but everything about it just makes me uncomfortable. Children are terrifying, so yet again, I'm not scared of animatronics outside of water, and I'm not scared of whales, but this makes me want to crawl into a hole and die. This one, she's so close to not being nightmare fuel. Look how close she is to the surface. No, still makes me want to throw up. I just don't think that this one needs an explanation. My palms were sweating just looking up images for this video. So yeah, let me know if you also have a horrific case of submechanophobia.
The Salish sea foot discoveries. They are not sitting right with me. We need to talk about this phenomenon. On August 20th of 2007, a girl from Washington State was visiting Jedediah Island in British Columbia, Canada, when along the beach she discovered a men's shoe. Upon picking up said shoe, she realized that there was a partially decayed foot inside of it. Now, the foot was realized to belong to that of a man who had been missing for some time, but foul play was completely ruled out in discovery of the foot. Now, get this, between 2007 and 2018, at least 15 feet have been discovered along the shores of British Columbia, as well as 5 in Washington of the United States. A potential explanation was discovered through a surgeon here on TikTok named Dr. Raj. He explained that when a corpse sinks, it is quickly eaten up by scavengers who prefer softer tissues and ligaments like the ones around our ankles, so they eat around our ankles and our feet detach. He continued to say that more feet started showing up in the 2000s because the development of shoe design increased their buoyancy, making it more likely for them to wash up on shore. Okay, fair enough, but why in 1887 did a foot attached to a leg inside of a boot wash up on a shore in Vancouver? Sure, the buoyancy theory can hold up. Rubber boots were invented about 30 years before this happened in the mid-1850s, but why again in British Columbia? Like, the first instance of a foot washing up on the Salish Sea shore dates back over 100 years. In 2010, a woman or child's foot, they're not sure, washed up on shore in Washington and no DNA match. Also in 2011, a human foot with a leg bone attached to it was found in a black plastic bag under a bridge in Washington. Still no DNA match. Whatever the explanation may be, all of these feet washing up within such a small vicinity is a crazy coincidence. Even authorities have admitted this, yet they still rolled out foul play. I'm still suspicious. What about you?
Welcome to part 11 of random shit about serial killers that you may or may not find interesting. His identity is still unknown, but the doodler was linked to 16 murders in the 1970s, and he targeted gay men specifically. He got his name the Doodler because he was a very talented artist, and he would go to gay bars, draw pictures of men, approach them, and say, "Hey, do you like my doodle?" It's speculated that those who may have encountered him and knew who he was didn't come forward at the time because they were scared of being outed. The Doodler is still at large, and as of January of this year, he's been linked to a new murder based on his MO, and the reward for turning him in has been raised to $200,000. Paul Stefani, otherwise known as the Weepy-Voiced Killer, was convicted of 3 murders and 2 attempted during the early 1980s in Wisconsin. He's referred to as the Weepy-Voiced Killer because he would make anonymous phone calls to the police where he would confess to his crimes, and he would do this kind of high-pitched, whiny voice to disguise his own. In 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer lured 14-year-old, I'm really sorry, Konarak Symphosyphone? Into his Milwaukee apartment. He proceeded to drill a hole into the boy's head, but the boy wouldn't die, and he would escape Dahmer's apartment and run into the street. He was spotted outside of Dahmer's apartment, and the police were called. Upon police arrival, bystanders' claims that he was severely injured were completely disregarded. Dahmer somehow convinced the police that the boy was his 19-year-old lover who had just had too much to drink. He even showed them a picture of the boy partially naked to convince them further that they were just partners. So police did a quick round of Dahmer's apartment, apparently missed the smell of rotting corpses, and went on their way. And Dahmer would eventually kill and dismember the boy.
Let's look at some seemingly innocent photos that become very disturbing once you're given some context. This is a photo of 18-year-old Jolie Callan taken by her ex-boyfriend on a hike that he invited her on. Not long after this photo was taken, he would shoot Jolie twice in the head and push her body off the cliff. The night before, Jolie joked with a friend, "If something happens to me, you'll know who I was with." This photo of Myra Hindley was taken in northern England by a man named Ian Brady. During the 1960s, together, the two of them tortured and murdered 6 children. And in this photo, Myra is crouching over the grave of 12-year-old John Kilbride. While diving off the coast of Australia, a man took this photo of his wife. Unbeknownst to him, he had actually also captured the body of Tina Watson, who had been drowned by her husband that same day.
Let's talk about a true crime case that has stuck with me ever since I heard its story. John List was known as a hardworking accountant, devout Sunday school teacher, and family man living the American dream in his New Jersey mansion with his wife, 3 children, and mother. In 1971, List lost his job, and he just couldn't bring himself to tell his family after he couldn't find new employment, so he came up with Plan B. John began secretly taking money out of his mother's account because he couldn't face the embarrassment of collecting welfare, and he began to spend his days at the local train station so his family would think he was going to work. He quickly realized Plan B was unsustainable, so he curated Plan C. On the morning of November 9th, 1971, John saw his kids off to school while his wife Helen prepared her morning cup of coffee in the kitchen. Once the kids were off, John approached Helen in the kitchen and shot her dead. He then headed up to the 3rd floor, ensuring his mother Alma suffered the same fate and shot her in her bed. He killed his 16-year-old daughter Patricia and his 13-year-old son Frederick upon their return from school. He then proceeded to close all of his bank accounts, make himself a sandwich, and head to his son John's soccer game where he would cheer him on, bring him home, and shoot him dead as well. He laid all 5 bodies out on the ballroom floor on some old sleeping bags, cleaned up the scene, and cut his face out of all photos that were displayed in the house. John would leave a 5-page note to his pastor claiming that this was the only way that his family could get into heaven. John wrote a note to his kids' school saying they were going on vacation. He canceled all upcoming deliveries, turned on all the lights, and let religious hymns play throughout the house on the radios, and went to bed. Unwilling to face the consequences of his heinous actions, John fled the next morning. Authorities would investigate about a month later when neighbors became suspicious of the lights always being on, nobody seeming to be home, and the music playing throughout the house. Police discovered the 5 bodies, John's note, and eventually his car at Kennedy International Airport. With no sign of John, the case went cold until 1989. The FBI came up with this idea to have an expert forensic artist sculpt John based on how he would have aged. Authorities were overwhelmed with tips once the sculpture was released, but one stuck out to them: accountant and churchgoer Robert Clark. As it turns out, on November 10th of 1971, John List fled to Colorado and eventually Richmond, Virginia. Police figured all this out, and John's ruse was up on June 1st of 1989 when he was arrested. I feel like this is worth mentioning just because it blows my mind. So List's defense lawyers claimed that a midlife crisis was the cause of his actions and that he should be excused for that reason. In the end, John was given 5 life sentences and died at the age of 82 in 2002 in a New Jersey prison. The morbid cherry on top, when asked, John List claimed that he did not take his own life after killing his entire family because he was afraid to lose his spot in heaven.
Here are some paranormal superstitions that I discovered on Reddit. Should you attend a funeral or burial or visit a haunted place before returning home, it is recommended that you stop somewhere else on the way. This is to prevent spirits from following you into your space. You should never whistle at night. It is believed to be disrespectful to spirits and will attract both negative behavior from them as well as bad luck. You should never have the foot of your bed directly facing your doorway. This invites demons to drag you by your feet off of your bed, out of your room, and to wherever they may please. This one comes from someone who works in an elderly care facility. If a person passes, you must open the window of the room that they passed in so that their soul can roam freely and won't be trapped. Never trim your nails or hair at night, or you will become haunted. Finally, if you paint the ceiling of your porch paint blue, it will ward off evil spirits. Since spirits cannot cross water, when they see the blue, they mistake it for water and move on.
Are you guys fucking seeing this? Are you seeing this? Or am I fucking crazy? Holy shit, I'm gonna fucking cry, scream, shit myself, and throw up. These are fucking crazy.
The ocean is terrifying. Cool. Let's talk about it. Okay, so there are many ocean currents going every which direction. We know this. But sometimes they can sort of like separate and make these circular currents. These are called eddies. Now, the largest eddies in the world numerically are equivalent to like black holes in space. If you get caught in one of these, you're not getting back out. Will I ever get caught in one of the ocean's versions of a black hole? Probably not. Do I still have an irrational fear of them? Yeah. Alright, so pressure can be measured in bars. Now at sea level, the atmospheric pressure is around 1 bar, which feels normal to us. The pressure at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, the deepest point in the ocean, is 1,086 bars. Theoretically, if you could go down there and survive, it would feel like 100 adult elephants were standing on your head. For me, that just fuels the idea of how powerful the ocean is. And it's really cool, but it also horrifies me. This one doesn't really fuel my fear of the ocean, but it still freaked me out nonetheless. So remember this picture of the blobfish that became like a huge meme? Well, blobfish usually live between 600 meters and 1,200 meters deep, where the pressure is really high. And their bodies are made to withstand this pressure. So when Mr. Blobby was brought to the surface, his body couldn't handle it and he experienced decompression. So he just kind of went... My point is that this is what blobfish are supposed to look like, and I'm really sorry for ever laughing at you, Mr. Blobby. In England on May 26th of 1957, Mary Bell was born to a mother who really wanted nothing to do with her from the get-go. she was always absent, and when she was there, she was emotionally and physically abusive towards Mary. At one point, she even tried to give her away, but Mary's aunt stepped in and stopped this. And Mary would even later claim that her mother forced her into sex work at a very young age. Morbid cherry on top, at just 5 years old, Mary actually witnessed her friend get hit by a bus. Very, very rough start for Mary. Really tragic. By May of 1968, when Mary was 10 years old, she was racking up a lot of counts of violence towards other children, and at one point, 3 different mothers actually came forward claiming that Mary had tried to choke their children. And then the day before her 11th birthday, May 25th, Mary would strangle and kill 4-year-old Martin Brown, but with no evidence of any violence and an empty pill bottle near his body, his death was ruled an accident. Days following the murder, Mary would actually knock on the door of Martin's parents and say, "Hey, can Martin come out to play?" And they're like, "Well, no, he's dead." And she said, "I know, I just want to see his body in the coffin." Then Mary and her friend Norma knew about what Mary had done. They broke into a nursery school and started posting notes everywhere, confessing to the murder and claiming that they would kill again. At this point, Mary is bragging about what she's done, but she's sort of known already as the girl who cried wolf, so nobody took her seriously. And just a couple months later, on July 31st, Mary and Norma would strangle Brian Howe, age 3, to death. Mary actually even, damaged the body, you could say, with scissors, and later during the autopsy, it was discovered that she had carved an M into his torso. Obviously, Brian was missing, so his sister started to search for him, and Mary and Norma offered their help. And even at one point, Mary pointed out where his body actually was, and Norma said, "No, there's no way he's over there," and they just kind of moved on. When Brian's body was eventually found, obviously everyone was panicked, especially parents, and police actually started investigating and interrogating children because the coroner had said that with the little force that was used to kill Brian, that the killer was probably a child. So Norma and Mary were actually seen on the day that Brian was killed with Brian, so they were up next, and they were acting very strangely. Norma seemed excited, while Mary seemed sort of just avoidant. I can't make this shit up. On the day of Brian's funeral, Mary was seen rubbing her hands together when she saw his coffin. During her second interview, Mary was like, "Well, I saw a boy hurt Brian with scissors that day," and the cops were like, "We haven't revealed that any scissors were used. Yeah, we know it's you." In the end, Norma was acquitted, said to have been a victim of a bad influence, and Mary was charged with manslaughter because she was found to be a psychopath. She was locked up until she was said to be rehabilitated at the age of 23 and was let out on strict probation. Today she has a daughter and lives anonymously, protected under court order.
Are you familiar with the uncanny valley? If not, it's that feeling that you may experience when you see something that's humanoid, but something's not quite right. Like, for example, when you see a robot or a wax figure. Now, there are many theories as to why we experience this phenomenon, but one that a lot of people like to go with is that somewhere along the way during evolution, we learned not to trust things that look very human that aren't exactly human. That honestly creeps me out so much, but I'm curious to know what your theories are. Here are some more underwater creatures that make me very uncomfortable. So starting off with sperm whales, they're pretty chill. They don't really freak me out, but have you seen how they sleep? Like, what in the Easter Island is going on here? You know that unspoken rule where when you sleep over at a friend's, you kind of just pretend to stay asleep until they wake up? I feel like at a sperm whale sleepover would just be so much more awkward. Hey, bro. Yo. Psst. Are you awake? This little dude is called the sarcastic fringe head. I guess they ran out of name ideas, I don't know. They're found in the Northeast Pacific Ocean between the depths of 3 and 75 meters. Now, these guys are very territorial, and although they've only been known to grow to about a foot in length, they can pack a punch. Just watch this. Been known to defend their home from any living creature, including humans, so don't go stepping on this little demogorgon looking ass dude shit. So these phallic freaks of nature are a species of fish called blind gobies. Pretty self-explanatory, they're blind and usually live most of their lives under mud. Although these are their teeth and they are native to the coastlines of Southern California in the United States and Baja California in Mexico. Same as our sarcastic friend who we met earlier, so if you're in either of those areas, watch your toes. This case is extremely gruesome, disturbing, and graphic, so there's going to be a major content warning on this video. The jury deliberated for under an hour to find 25-year-old Taylor Shabiznis guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, mutilation of a corpse, and third-degree SA. On February 22nd of 2022, Shabiznis took the life of 24-year-old Shad Therian in the basement of his mother's home in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The two had smoked methamphetamine together and then had a sexual encounter that involved Shabiznis choking Therian with a chain. This originally started as a form of foreplay, but then during her interrogation, Shabiznis admitted that she started to enjoy it and wanted to see what would happen if she continued. She said it took 3 to 5 minutes for Therian to stop breathing, but then she also claimed that she blacked out during this time. I'm not sure if this was some sort of defense for her behavior, but she also asked the detective if they knew what it was like to love something so much you kill it. The crime scene was actually discovered by Shad's mother, Tara Pokanich, when she heard her storm door slamming in the basement, went downstairs to investigate, and discovered Shad's head and private parts in a bucket. Upon arrival, authorities were also met with a bloody mattress. Shabiznis had mutilated and dismembered Shad with multiple kitchen knives, of which she said a bread knife was most effective due to its serrated blade. Shabiznis had what she referred to as played with Therian's body for hours post-mortem. She also said that police were going to have fun trying to find all of Shad's organs, as she had removed them one by one and scattered them all over the basement. And they did find body parts scattered all over the basement, including Shad's torso, with his foot shoved into his empty chest cavity. Shabiznis was found at a nearby apartment complex with what appeared to be blood all over her hands and clothes and scratches on her hands and arms. Shabiznis chose not to take the stand in her own defense, but she did decide that it would be appropriate to smirk and laugh throughout her trial thus far, including during Shad's mother's testimony. Keep in mind that this woman has a husband who loves her no matter what, and is also a mother to a 2-year-old boy who currently lives with his grandparents because both of his parents are incarcerated. Today is day 4 of the trial. They're in phase 2, where a jury will determine whether or not Shabiznis was suffering a mental illness or defect during the actions that she was convicted of. Now, there are many more details to this case, but I just want to say, if you're gonna go searching, do it at your own risk.
Tomino's Hell was written in 1919 by Saijo Yaso and is alleged to curse and even sometimes kill those who read it aloud. And this curse is said to not be able to be undone. A lot of people believe that Saijo wrote this poem as a form of catharsis after World War I, where he lost either his sister or his father. Opinion differs on which. Japanese filmmaker Terayama Shuji directed the 1974 film To Die in the Country, which was based on Tomino's story. He died in 1983 of liver failure, and a lot of people blame this on the curse of the poem. There are many posts online of people claiming to have been cursed by Tomino's Hell, or posting that they were going to read it aloud, never to give an update again. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and here is the English version for those who are curious. Here are some more underwater creatures that make me very uncomfortable. This is a baby moray eel. Now, it's only made up of one thin layer of muscle tissue. You may be thinking, what's creepy about this? It's kind of cool. No. This is what they grow up to look like. I want nothing to do with that. The gulper eel, otherwise known as the pelican eel, can consume prey that's much larger than itself. They average about 2 to 3 feet in length. What's larger than 2 to 3 feet? Myself. Will I ever encounter this creature thousands of feet below the surface where they reside? No. Do they still freak me out? Absolutely. This is a Japanese spider crab. Their leg span can be up to 3.9 meters or 12 feet across, and they can weigh up to 44 pounds. I'm done. You're done. We're done here. Let's look at some underwater creatures that make me very uncomfortable. First up, we have the big fin squid. Now, the longest one of these recorded was 6.4 meters long. I'm sorry, but this guy, he's definitely friends with the Kraken. Moving on. Goblin shark. I hate it. They have like these, I guess you could call them slingshot type jaws. I'm just gonna show you. They're known to be harmless to humans, but I still don't want that anywhere near me. Thank you. This one's a phantom jellyfish, and it's actually kind of cool, but they can be found between the surface and about 22,000 feet deep. So imagine you like fall off a boat and get caught in this dude's curtain arms. I'm good on that. And finally, here's some eye bleach for you. This is a Dumbo octopus. Isn't he cute? Just look how shy he is.
I love him.
Did you know that at one point John Wayne Gacy worked as a Democratic precinct captain, and through this work met Rosalind Carter, the wife of the 39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter? Yeah. Welcome to part 21 of random shit about serial killers that you may or may not find interesting. McRae Edwards was responsible for the deaths of 6 children. He worked as a heavy equipment operator and helped build highways throughout California. He buried 2 of his victims that we know of in places where he knew that highways would be built over eventually. But not all of his victims' bodies have been found, so there still could be some under California's highways. Sometimes referred to as the British Jeffrey Dahmer due to their similar MO and victim preference, Dennis Nilsen killed at least 12 young boys and men. Himself, among fellow tenants, complained about a clogged drain in their building. The plumber who came to check it out found small bones and flesh clogging the drain, and Dennis said, "Oh, somebody must be flushing their Kentucky Fried Chicken." Well, no. They figured out that it was human remains because Dennis was getting rid of some of the remains by flushing them down his toilet, so he essentially ratted himself out. Here's some things that I know about the ocean that heavily influence me to stay on shore when I go to the beach. So you know when you see underwater photos and there are these like little white specks? Well, those are called marine snow, and what they are essentially just organic debris, aka chunks of rotting fish flesh falling to the ocean floor. So enjoy your next swim and keep your mouth closed. Riptides, bro. So if you don't know what riptides are, they're basically narrow currents of water caused by the tides that pull the water back in the opposite direction of the shore. Now, if you get caught in one and you're not calm and you panic, odds are it's going to pull you out into the ocean and you're just going to keep fighting it until you get exhausted to the point that you drown. According to the United States Life-Saving Association, these things kill over 100 people a year. And consider that that is just in the US. If I ever got caught in one of these, all that would be on my mind is that I was going to get dragged out to the depths of the ocean and get eaten by the Kraken. So rockfish are these little fish that just chill at the bottom of the ocean floor. Can you see him on first glance in this photo? Exactly. They're very good at camouflaging themselves as harmless rocks. If you step on one, they'll shoot out these little dorsal spines out of their back that inject venom into your foot and can cause a lot of pain and infection. But hey, don't worry, there are a multitude of other fish within the same species, some of which their venom is deadly, and also they can be found all over the world. Isn't that awesome? Let's look at an SCP that does an excellent job at fueling my fear of ocean creatures. Should someone be provided a complete description, whether it's visualized, written, or spoken, of exactly what SCP-1128 looks like, it will manifest itself. Its general appearance is described as a massive aquatic predator. Those who learn this anomaly's exact description will become infected. Infections, in some cases, have resulted in a fear of submerging in water. Otherwise, victims don't behave strangely. If infected victims are fully submerged in water, no matter how deep, they will disappear. The majority of the time, they resurface expressing fear and panic. Other times, it's just their blood and partial remains that surface. Those who come out alive say that they were transported to the vast ocean and pursued by SCP-1128. This was proven in an experiment involving a disposable class test subject. Interviews with survivors are difficult given that infections are spread through accurate descriptions. Staff or anyone that aren't test subjects that are exposed to this description are to be given Class C amnestics to eliminate their memory of SCP-1128. Descriptions are to be kept by the Foundation for experimental purposes, and any information found outside of the Foundation is to be destroyed. Test subject D1732 was used in multiple testing procedures related to this anomaly. They were not given amnestics after these tests and were actually able to encounter SCP-1128 even without fully immersing their body in water. With time, their fear of water drastically intensified. On date redacted, days after initial exposure, D1732 was violently pulled into a glass of water by redacted. No remains were ever discovered and further testing was terminated. Welcome to interesting ocean facts that also creep me the fuck out. Starting off strong, named after the Greek god of the underworld, Hades, the deepest parts of the ocean are known as Hadal zones. I feel like that says enough in itself. It is possible for there to be up to 10 million viruses in just 1 milliliter of ocean water. That is more than the number of stars that are in the Milky Way. Now, while a lot of them aren't harmful to humans, just the idea of how vast the ocean's ecosystem is makes me cringe. Underwater visibility depends on the turbidity of the water, so like how cloudy it is. In clear water, the average person can see about 80 meters or around 260 feet ahead of them. What I'm getting from this is that I could be in the thick of the ocean and 100 meters away, there might be a giant, creepy, gross sea creature that I can't see, and I hate that. It's estimated that there are the remains of around 3 million shipwrecks on the ocean floor. AKA you could look at the ocean as a giant cemetery, AKA water ghosts, AKA it's gonna be a big fat fucking no from me. NASA was originally founded to explore the ocean, but they found something unknown that scared them so bad that they started investigating space to get us the fuck off this planet. That is a myth that just went mega viral on TikTok. But NASA does study our ocean to better understand water ecosystems on other planets and in turn understand ours better, which isn't really that scary, but honestly it's kind of scary if I think about it too much. But anyway, it's super cool nonetheless, and NASA was not created to explore the ocean.
This woman and her boyfriend move into this old decrepit house, and he's in charge of all the construction while she's to remove the wallpaper. Now there was wallpaper everywhere, the ceilings, every single wall, and she was like, this job kinda sucks. But then she thought it's kinda satisfying, like when you get a nice long peel from a sunburn. She decided to make it a game of how long of a piece she could peel at once. Then she discovered something curious. Under each corner of each piece of wallpaper there was a date and a name. She Googles one of the names and it's that of a missing person. The dates match up and everything. Okay, weird. Next day she does some more digging and each name was that of a missing person and all the dates lined up with the day that the person went missing. Naturally, they contact the authorities and a few are sent over to investigate. They're checking things out and the girl's in the next room, but what she overhears confuses her. Human? What's human? So they approach her and ask, ma'am, where's the material that you've removed so far? It wasn't wallpaper. This photo, taken by NASA's Curiosity rover on Mars, was released recently and people are freaking out because it resembles a door. A lot of people are of course running with the idea of ancient aliens, or that aliens reside on Mars and NASA is just hiding this from the public. Some are suggesting that the doorway looks like it's leading to a descending staircase, or that there's even a figure visible in the corner. People are trolling conspiracy theorists or just making jokes like that's where they hid all the real birds. The best nightclubs on Mars have no sign. Which episode of The Twilight Zone was this from? But experts say that it's just a result of erosion and natural vertical fractures. British geologist Neil Hodgson says that it seems a large boulder has fallen out under its weight. There are a lot of geometric and or unnatural looking formations in rocks all over the world, but I think that people are just freaking out because this is on Mars. And obviously jumping to the conclusion of aliens. Now the close-up picture is a little bit deceiving and it looks like it's a full doorway, but it's actually less than 3 feet tall. So I'm not about to rule out cute little tiny aliens, but let me know what you think.
The Hoya Baciu Forest is located in Transylvania and is considered an enigma by many. You may have even seen photos of it before as it's home to these weird shaped trees. It got its nickname the Bermuda Triangle of Romania because a shepherd reported that he lost his whole flock of 200 sheep within the woods. But these woods are also home to many other mysteries. Upon entering, a lot of people said that they felt watched or unwelcome and even claimed sudden physical ailments like nausea, vomiting, anxiety, and in some cases just random burns appearing on their skin. There are accounts of technological malfunction, and even more bizarre, geometric-like objects have been said to appear anywhere between the forest floor to the sky above, kind of like UFOs. Photos taken upon development showed like weird apparitions and orbs that the people couldn't see off camera, and in some cases what looked to be disembodied faces. It's speculated by many parapsychologists that this place is an interdimensional portal where spirits can materialize, it's a paranormal hotspot, and is also one of the most haunted forests in the world. There are what seems to be endless accounts of strange phenomena occurring in Hoya Baciu, and that puts it on my bucket list of places to go, but I'm curious to know what you think.
You know that since 2017 there have been 132 grain entrapment related deaths? Like as in people getting stuck after accidentally submerging themselves in grain. Terrifying. Welcome to random facts that you may or may not care to know. You've been warned. On average, approximately 30 insect fragments as well as 1 or more rodent hairs are allowed in 100 grams of peanut butter. By the FDA. There are morgues on cruise ships, and yeah, that makes perfect sense, but I hadn't even thought about it until I read about it. And maybe you hadn't either, but now you have. I guess this is more food for thought, but today is the oldest you've ever been and the youngest you'll ever be. Fuck it, man. Eat the peanut butter anyway. And finally, just a little palate cleanser. Mr. Rogers' mom actually knit all of his sweaters for him.
As of April 22nd, John Richardson is facing the charges of 3 first-degree murders, among other charges. Michael Hemphill was found on January 25th with a gunshot wound and would die in the hospital on February 1st. Mark Anthony Gilbert Jr. was found nearly beaten to death on March 10th and would actually die later that day. Charges unrelated to the murders would grant police a search warrant, and in Richardson's house they found 2 handguns, ammunition, knives, and a hatchet. A A few days later, Jonathan Murphy would be arrested in the connection to Michael Hempfield's murder, the first victim, and allegedly texts between Murphy and Richardson linked Richardson to the murder. After having been missing since March 25th, the dismembered body of James Goolsbee was found in the Mayo River on April 13th. The authorities haven't released an official potential motive for Richardson, but a lot of people online are speculating that his crimes were racially motivated. Authorities are also exploring the possibility that Richardson is a serial killer and is actually linked to several other homicides. Should you have any information that you think may be useful, you can call this number here.
The longest squid that's ever been discovered was a giant squid that was 13 meters long. To put that into perspective, that's longer, even a little bit more, than the height of 4 NBA hoops. But the existence of the Kraken is unrealistic. Right. This one's for those of you with thalassophobia. So at 20,000 kilometers approximately, the Pacific Ocean's longest stretch is 5 times the diameter of the moon. Imagine just getting plopped in the middle of that. My worst nightmare. Also, the Antarctic ice sheet, only one of 2 that remain on Earth, is approximately 14 million square kilometers. It's terrifying how massive that is, but also more unsettling, we're the reason that it's shrinking. Okay, so there's a spot in the Pacific Ocean east of Hawaii where a shit ton of sharks gather annually, and it's called the White Shark Cafe. It's actually the largest migration of animals on Earth. You're probably thinking, okay, why is that scary? Well, I'll tell you what, they're plotting. Now, I don't know what they're plotting, but I know that this guy's got something to do with it. Kiss my ass. Infamous last words of killer clown John Wayne Gacy, who killed at least 33 young men and boys. What a guy. Let's look at some other things that serial killers have had to say. H.H. Holmes, who quite literally had what was basically a murder castle, confessed to 27 murders in the 1800s, but the number's thought to be like in the hundreds. So one day, H.H. Holmes just casually said, "I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer, no more than the poet can help the inspiration to sing. I was born with the evil one standing as my sponsor beside the bed where I was ushered into the world, and he has been with me since." I mean, I guess he was pretty self-aware. Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker, was convicted of 13 murders. He once said, "I killed 20 people, man. I love all that blood." I hate this man. Dennis Rader, aka BTK, aka one of America's most notorious, was convicted of all 10 of his murders and was given 10 life sentences in 2005. Now, I find this pretty interesting because it's similar to what H.H. Holmes had to say. So, when this monster entered my brain, I will never know, but it is here to stay. How does one cure himself? I can't stop it. The monster goes on and hurts me as well as society. Maybe you can stop him. I can't.
One night, a young woman was drifting off to sleep in her one-bedroom apartment, but she couldn't quite fall asleep because there was a dripping sound coming from the other room. So she rolls out of bed, she goes to the kitchen, checks the faucet, it's not leaking, she thinks, okay, and she stumbles back to her room. She slumps back onto her bed, hangs her arm off the edge, and is comforted when her dog gives her hand a gentle lick, just reminding her that she's safe. She's trying to fall back asleep again, and she hears drip, drip, drip. And she's like, ugh. I don't feel like getting up, but her dog licks her hand again and reassures her. Again, drip, drip, drip. Now she's frustrated, so she says, okay, I'll get up and go check the bathroom faucets. She shuffles to the bathroom, flicks on the light, rubbing her eyes, and she checks the sink. Nothing. So she turns around, to check the tub, and she's met with a horrific sight. Her poor dog was hanging from the shower head, its blood leaking into the tub. Drip, drip, drip. And then written on the wall, it reads, "Humans can lick too."
In 1895, an article about human freaks was published based on the Royal Scientific Society's reports on these people with bizarre physical abnormalities, one of them being this guy right here, Edward Mordrake. Edward was said to be a very talented musician and was often described as handsome, but the face on the back of his head had some very ugly tendencies. This face was referred to as Edward's devil twin because it would say awful things, quote, "such things as they only speak in hell." The face would even grin and seemingly get pleasure when Edward would cry or be upset. This became Edward's constant, and it got to the point where he couldn't even sleep. And well, at one point he just couldn't take it anymore, and he actually took his life when he was 23 years old. Edward demanded an his final note that this face be removed and eradicated, quote, "lest it continue its dreadful whisperings in my grave." Well, this is actually a wax figure, and the Royal Scientific Society wasn't even an organization at the time. And the author of the article that featured Edward actually specialized in science fiction. The author actually did cite the Royal Scientific Society, and AKA intended for it to be interpreted as real. At the time, it blew up, and people really believed this was factual, but now it's more known as kind of like an urban legend, I guess. But some people still believe that this was a true account and based on real events. I know I did when I was 12 and I saw it on Reddit for the first time, but I don't think I really believe it anymore. But I'm curious to know what you think. Vincent van Gogh is regarded as one of the most famous post-impressionist painters, if not of all time. Even if you're not interested in art, you've probably heard his name. But this recognition actually only came after his death, and he really lived a harrowing life. He suffered from alcoholism, epilepsy, syphilis, mental illness. I'm sure that you've heard the story of him cutting off his own ear and giving it to a sex worker. So due to this mental illness, when Vincent turned up one day with a gunshot wound to the torso claiming, "I have tried to kill myself," it was widely accepted and is still accepted that he did in fact try to kill himself. But a theory proposed by these two writers here claims otherwise. In May of 1890, Van Gogh moved to a peaceful Paris suburb to find solace and nurture his mental health. There he would actually find himself creating a painting each day for 70 consecutive days. He fits the classic sort of stereotype of the tortured artist who finds catharsis in their work. And now finally, things were looking up for Van Gogh. So one summer day, he decided to go get himself some new supplies, and then the next day, on July 27th of 1890, he would go to a nearby wheat field to take advantage of his newfound inspiration. All of this only to later return to the inn that day with a self-inflicted bullet wound that would ultimately take his life 20 painful hours later. So the two writers that I mentioned previously see a few discrepancies within this. While Van Gogh's brother Theo would later claim that his brother was lonely and did talk about self-harm, Van Gogh seemed to have found some new sort of peace and his creativity was at its peak. He had also just purchased fresh supplies the day before, so they thought that that was kind of weird as well. They also pointed out that shooting yourself in the abdomen is sort of an unusual, uncommon way to take your own life. So for that reason, they thought that maybe this was done by a bully of Van Gogh's. It was this kid and his friends who they would walk around with a revolver and they would pick on vulnerable people. The bully would make fun of Van Gogh behind his back, but then he would be nice to his face and he would pull sort of pranks on him, like he would ruin his paintings or throw out his supplies, and one time even put a snake in his paint box. So these writers proposed that during a routine session of these bullies picking on Van Gogh, things went a little too far and they committed manslaughter. But this main bully had an alibi and the gun was also left at the scene, which would just be kind of a silly thing to do. Finally, they point out that there were no witnesses. The only known considerable witness was the 13-year-old daughter of the innkeeper who Van Gogh approached and said, I just tried to kill myself. They're suspicious of her because she would change her testimony a few times throughout the investigation, and she kind of went back and forth he said that, oh maybe he didn't say that, whatever. But she was 13 and probably traumatized. Personally, I think that Van Gogh probably had some sort of break and did take his own life, but it is interesting to theorize about, and I'd love to know what you think.
What if you went missing and had no idea what happened to you? This is the disappearance and bizarre reappearance of Stephen Kubacki. Stephen Kubacki was a student at Hope College who went missing just a few days into his cross-country skiing trip near Saugatuck, Michigan in February of 1978. Upon a search for Stephen, authorities discovered approximately 180 meters of footprints in the snow. When they realized that the prints stopped at the edge of Lake Michigan, it was concluded that Stephen must have fallen into the lake, been trapped under the ice, and drowned. Later that same month, some snowboarders found Stephen's abandoned skis and backpack in the area where he went missing. Then, over a year later, on May 5th of 1979, something unbelievable happened. Stephen woke up in the grass of Pittsfield, Massachusetts, over 700 miles from where he originally went missing. He had absolutely no memory of the previous 15 months and reported wearing unfamiliar clothing and a backpack containing multiple maps suggesting a lot of travel. He also claimed to have felt like he had done a lot of running and even found a t-shirt in his backpack from a Wisconsin marathon that he cannot explain. Theories about what happened to Stephen range from extreme amnesia to alien abduction to the idea that he may have traveled to another dimension for those 15 months. I think it is of note that a lot of people have gone missing in strange and mysterious ways within the Lake Michigan triangle that Stephen supposedly fell into. This woman solved the case of her own murder from beyond the grave. Teresita Basa, born in 1929, moved from the Philippines to Chicago, Illinois to study music and worked as a respiratory therapist. On February 21st of 1977, Teresita shared a phone call with a friend where she mentioned that she was expecting a guest, though she didn't mention who the guest was or why he would be stopping by. About an hour later, neighbors called the fire department to Teresita's apartment with complaints about the smell of smoke within the vicinity. They arrived at a horrific scene. Teresita was discovered under a flaming mattress, unclothed, with a knife through her chest. There were originally no leads in the investigation. Teresita was very admired by everyone around her, so nobody could possibly understand who would do this, or why. It was until 6 months later when Dr. Jose Chua, a co-worker of Teresita, his wife Remy began experiencing a very strange phenomenon. One night, the couple was lying in bed, and Remy went into a trance-like state during which she muttered, "Doctor, I would like to ask you for help. The man who murdered me is still at large. I am Teresita Basa." Jose and Remy believed the spirit of Teresita was possessing Remy to give them information about her murder. The couple were hesitant to go to the police out of fear that nobody would believe them, but after multiple more visits from Teresita, the straw that broke the camel's back was when she revealed her killer's name. She claimed the man who took her life was Alan Showery, who was also a co-worker. She said that the friend who came over the night of her murder came by to fix her TV, but he stole her late mother's jewelry and her life instead. Being their only lead, when the Chuas made a report about their experience, the police decided to follow it up. They went to Alan Showery's residence, and sure enough, his girlfriend was in possession of Teresita's stolen jewelry. During questioning, Alan said that he did stop by to fix Teresita's TV. He was struggling financially and she was paying him for odd jobs, but he didn't have the proper tools, so instead he robbed and murdered her. With evidence stacked against him, Alan confessed and was sentenced to just 14 years in 1979. Not only that, he was released from prison after 4 years. Do you think any justice that Teresita's alleged ghost was fighting for was even served? What are your thoughts on this case?
Welcome to part 2 of theories about aliens that may or may not lead you down a rabbit hole. So if you don't already know, there are lost tribes all over the world, a lot of which are located in the Amazon. Now, for the most part, these tribes are just left to do their things. So what if extraterrestrials follow the same rule of thumb when it comes to us, just on a much more vast scale? That would explain why we haven't had any contact with them, as they're just leaving us be. Now, if there's a species with the means to contact us that are extraterrestrial, maybe they wouldn't necessarily do so. Rather, they would study us similarly to how we do animals, i.e. how we dart animals to sedate them, study them, leave them unharmed but a little confused, aka exactly how people report feeling after they've claimed to be abducted by aliens. First of all, I think these ones are kinda cute. Considering time as a construct that we've made up, what if the idea of time for different species on different planets is completely different? So we're all advancing at different rates, and us on Earth just aren't technologically aligned in a way that would allow us to visit species on other planets and vice versa. So maybe what are aliens to us are out there already making contact with each other and we're just kind of behind. And just to sprinkle a little fuel onto your fear of the ocean, what if aliens are using places in the ocean that we haven't discovered yet or studied yet as a place to hide? I really hate that one.
On February 11th of 1979, 5 friends who were very experienced on the water set off for a fishing trip just off the shore of Hana, a town in Maui. They rode off on a nice clear morning in their 17-foot Boston whaler called the Sarah Joe. Unexpectedly, this freak storm occurs and there was no sign of the men or the Sarah Joe upon a search the next day. A whole 73,000 miles search later and still nothing. Then it gets weird. Over a decade later, John Naughton, who was part of the original search, is on a wildlife expedition 2,000 miles west of Maui in the Marshall Islands. On a deserted atoll, which is essentially a coral island, John discovers a boat which he would later come to realize was the Sarah Joe. Even more strange, nearby, John and his crew discovered a grave with a human jawbone sticking out of it. A partial human skeleton was exhumed from the grave and was found to be one of the 5 missing men, Scott Mormon, but no evidence of the 4 other missing men was discovered. Another strange piece to the puzzle was discovered when they found small squares of paper in a stack with a piece of tinfoil in between each piece of paper. The cherry on top, a government survey of this exact atoll was done in 1985 and found no evidence of the Sarah Joe ever having been there. So where were they during those 6 years between 1979 and 1985 when the survey was done? What happened? Where are the other 4 men? I have no clue, but let me know what you think.
This
story is sad and disturbing and left me with many more questions than answers, so let's get into it. Pauline Picard lived with her family in a rural town in France. They lived on a quiet farm in a quiet town, so Pauline's parents were never overly concerned for the safety of her and her 8 siblings. In April of 1992, all the kids were playing outside when they were called in for dinner, and each sibling returned except for Pauline. A huge search involving over 150 people was launched. They searched all the surrounding forests and fields, but no trace of Pauline was found. People speculated that she fell victim to wild animals or the weather, and there were even rumors that a lurking chimney sweep had abducted her. But then not even a month later, it seemed like the case of missing Pauline was solved. Around 350 kilometers away, a young girl resembling Pauline was found wandering the streets. Though her age was not confirmed, when Pauline's parents were showed a photo of this little girl, they confirmed, yep, that's Pauline, and they traveled to pick her up. Although when they got there, Pauline was not really excited to see them. She was just sort of indifferent. She also did not seem to understand or speak her mother tongue that she had been brought up exposed to in the first 2 years of her life. All of these things were basically overlooked and determined to be a result of trauma, although what had actually happened to Pauline to cause this trauma was not clear. Alas, they still said, yep, this is our Pauline, and over the next few weeks, things actually did start to improve. She started speaking her mother tongue, and things were just looking up, and her family was very happy to have Pauline home. But then, out of nowhere, something really strange occurs. One of the family's neighbors, who was known to the locals to just be a little bit out there, stopped by to visit Pauline, questioned her identity, stated, "God help me, I am guilty," and then ran off. Although not long after, he was admitted to a mental institution, so everybody just kind of brushed this off and they said, oh, that's just him being him, let's not worry about it. Then everything came to a head when the mutilated body of a small child was found in a nearby field. A local farmer discovered the child's decapitated body as well as a detached head not far from the body. Another strange detail, the child's clothes were found to be folded very neatly and placed beside the body. And what really just threw everybody for a loop is that later the head was discovered to be that of a grown man who to this day is unidentified. And very sadly, the body of the child was determined to be that of Pauline. And the parents did confirm that the clothes that were found with the body were the clothes that Pauline was wearing the day that she went missing. So this meant that the child that the Picards had been caring for months was not actually their daughter, and very sadly she was sent to an orphanage and died just a few months later from the measles. Now we're left with so many questions. What happened to Pauline? Where is her head? Why were her clothes folded neatly beside her? Why was her body not found during the search? Who is the man that the head belongs to that was found near Pauline's body? Why did they do it, and who was the little girl that they thought was Pauline? Here are some superstitions that I don't necessarily believe, but definitely find unsettling. You should never leave chairs in odd spaces, especially in the middle of a room. Some say that chairs in unusual places invite the unusual to sit in them. If a picture frame falls off the wall and breaks, something very bad will happen to those that were in the photo. If you sleep with a mirror facing your bed, it can act as a portal for bad spirits. Unexplained bruises are caused by ghosts pinching you while you sleep. And finally, if you don't hold your breath while passing a graveyard, you risk inhaling the spirits of the dead. Earlier this month, CCTV footage was posted of this strange-looking creature that was captured in Kentucky. Some people were like, oh my god, is that an alien? Why isn't it casting a shadow? What am I looking at? The first thing that came to mind when I was watching this video was, oh my god, that looks like the Rake. I'm sure that many of you have already seen this photo, but the Rake is just this creepy-looking humanoid creature that originated on 4chan as a creepypasta character. Although it's a fictional character, many people have speculated on footage such as this, claiming that they can see the Rake in the video. I'm the first to be curious before jumping to skepticism, but this just seems like one of your classic cryptid sightings that was filmed on what looks like a fucking toaster. Don't get me wrong, had I stumbled across this video at 3 a.m., I definitely still would have been creeped out, but let me know what you think. Here are some more underwater creatures that make me very uncomfortable. Honestly, I'm not really sure how this one hasn't come up yet, but first up we have the anglerfish. When I first saw this thing in Finding Nemo, it scared the living shit out of me. But damn, is it so much more terrifying in real life. And don't worry, not so fun fact, anglerfish actually refers to a variety of fish families, so there are many of these monstrosities to go around. Yay! Up next, we have the marine hatchetfish. And you may be thinking, well, come on, that looks just like the last one. Just wait. Huh? Bro looks just as flabbergasted as I did when I first saw this image. There is not one thought behind those eyes. So marine hatchetfish have these organs similar to fireflies that help their body light up, which I guess aids in protection and them getting laid, which is cool and all, but not cool enough for me to look at this image any longer. Moving on. Finally, we have the hagfish, a fish truly only a mother could love. They secrete this slimy substance that helps protect them from predators, and they are the only known animal to be without a spine but with a skull. It looks like an intestine. I've had enough for today. Here are some extinct underwater creatures that make it that much more believable to me that the kraken is down there. The Dunkleosteus was the top predator of its time, protected by its armored head, and it used its bony blades in its face to essentially crush its prey. It's thought to have been able to grow up to 10 meters long. To put that into perspective, this is it next to like an average-sized human. I cannot believe that this thing was real. It's giving Pokemon. Next up, we have this shark-like fish called a helicoprion. It had this circular set of over 125 teeth that formed to kind of look like a buzzsaw. And it would use these teeth to slice its prey in half. So we have the buzzsaw, the regular saw, and the hammerhead. Honestly, I'm not sure that I want to know what's next when it comes to tool-related anatomy. Here are some more underwater creatures that make me very uncomfortable. This is the tasseled wobblegong. No, I'm not joking. It is a species of carpet shark and the only member of its genus, thank God. It can reach 1.8 meters in length, which is the height of about the average man. I just can't, moving on. If you hate bugs, I guess I'm sorry in advance because this next one, the giant isopod, is like a giant creepy underwater bug. Unfortunately, they can be found in oceans all over the world, and the largest confirmed was 50 centimeters long. Apparently, regular isopods make great pets, but they can still stay the fuck. Last but not least, we have the sea cucumber, and I feel like its name is pretty self-explanatory. As a child, I held one of these at an aquarium, and it peed all over me. Yep, just peed all over my hands. So I have a bone to pick with these little freaks of nature. Anyway, let's cut to a clip of a different kind of sea cucumber eating.
This haunted Barbie was requested by a little girl from beyond the grave. The story behind this urban legend involves a little German girl who was so frightened that she ran to her death when her parents, who were alleged German spies, were retrieved by military forces from the island of Pulau Ubin in Singapore during World War I. The girl's remains were discovered at the bottom of a cliff, which she had fallen off of to her death. She was properly buried atop a nearby hill, and decades later, in 1974, a shrine was built atop her grave. The shrine became associated with good luck after a visitor won the lottery, so the little girl received many offerings from hopeful visitors, but these were not the offerings that she desired. This is where things get strange. In 2007, a man who was originally from the island of Pulau Ubin, now living in Australia, started to have this bizarre recurring dream. He dreamt of a little girl that appeared European who would lead him into a store and request a Barbie doll be purchased and placed at her shrine. So, when one day he came across the exact store and the exact doll that the little girl had requested, he immediately purchased it and brought it back to her shrine in Singapore, where it remains to this day in a glass case, supposedly housing the spirit of the little girl. The German girl still receives gifts, and to this day, locals of Pulau Ubin report sightings of her in the area where she met her tragic fate.
Today I'm starting a new video series called Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 1. Officers were dispatched to a call about a burglary in progress. The homeowner was in the kitchen and heard running upstairs. Officers arrived and set up a perimeter around the house. A canine officer gave several warnings saying that they were going to let a canine loose. Just as he gave the command, a perimeter officer saw a hand pull the curtain back on the top floor and relayed the information over the radio. The canine officer sent the dog in, and sure enough, no one was found. The perimeter officer was 100% certain of what he saw, and the homeowner was sure he heard running upstairs. Like for Part 2, Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 2. A police department started receiving calls from a vacant house twice a night for almost a week. The voice on the phone sounded like an elderly lady with Alzheimer's, barely audible, saying, please help, with coughing. The voice on the phone was totally unresponsive to dispatch's questions. Every time police went to the house, there was no one there. A records check showed that the previous owner of the house was a woman taking care of her elderly mother who was dying of lung cancer. Please like and share for more creepy police stories. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 3. A deputy who worked a backwoods county area stopped his vehicle because he had to go to the bathroom. The nearest bathroom was 30 minutes away, so he decided to stop on the side of the road. The deputy had this unnerving feeling like someone was watching him. He looked around, and about 20 feet from his patrol vehicle, he saw a shadowy figure standing there watching him. The deputy stopped, zipped up, and started questioning the figure, who did not respond at all. The deputy was scared that it might be an ambush, so he ordered the figure to show him his hands. Finally, the deputy pulled out a flashlight and aimed it right at the figure, who disappeared. The deputy could hear no movement, no rustling in the bushes, nothing. The deputy jumped back in his patrol vehicle, took one look back, and saw the creature there again, this time approaching him. So he took off. Like and share for more creepy police stories. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 4. About 20 years ago, several officers responded to an alarm call at an old PTA building in Austin, Texas. They found an unsecured door on one side of the property. The youngest officer posted himself there while the other officer went to search the property. The officer was staring right at the door when all of a sudden the alarm sounded again and the door slammed shut right in his face. The senior officer ran right back over to his position and asked why he slammed the door. The youngest officer said, "I didn't." The officers requested assistance from a canine unit. The dog searched the building and found nothing. Even though the dog was acting hinky like someone was in the building, it never picked up a scent. Finally, a key holder showed up. The officers told him what happened and he said, "Well, you know the place is haunted, right?" He told them there was a secretary that used to work there for 30 years, and after she died, there were reports she kept showing up for work. Like and follow for more creepy cop stories. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 5. Now this one's from a 911 dispatcher. She got a call from a family saying their teenage daughter was possessed. The dispatcher assumed it might be a mental health issue or possibly drug related, but the family assured her she had no history of anything like that. The family members were holding her down, and over the phone, the dispatcher could hear two people yelling at each other. The dispatcher asked the family to tell whoever was yelling at her to stop. The family replied, "It's her." The dispatcher said, "I know it's her. Get whoever's yelling at her to stop." The family replied, "It's her. Both voices." The dispatcher couldn't really explain it, but she could definitely tell she was listening to a young girl's voice with an adult male yelling back. In this situation, do not call 911, call a Catholic priest. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 6. One evening, several officers brought in a combative subject who was arrested for domestic violence. As they were bringing him into holding, they walked past cell number 1. The officers didn't pay much attention to him, but there was a guy standing in the cell. He looked normal, there was nothing really out of the ordinary about him. Later on in the shift, the officer was asked by a sergeant to do a head count before transporting the prisoners to county jail. The officer started with cell 1 and found it was empty. Everyone started to panic because they thought they lost a prisoner. They went over all the paperwork and found no one was ever placed in cell 1. The officers went to check video surveillance and found that sure enough, indeed, there was someone standing in cell 1. But the creepy thing was, as soon as the officers walked by the cell door, he just blinks out of existence. The officers tried to put this evidence of paranormal activity on a DVD or USB drive, but the footage didn't show up. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 7. At around 2 a.m., a young officer returned back to the patrol station because she was coming off shift. At that time of night, the station was usually empty. As she was walking towards the locker room, she walked by an empty admin area. She saw an older male officer that she didn't recognize, so she greeted him. He ignored her, and as she looked over her shoulder, she noticed he was gone. She was creeped out, but she just told herself she was imagining things. A couple of days went by, and she saw the picture of the same officer she saw that night on the wall of fallen officers. The officer had killed himself several years before. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 8. This one comes to us from Espanola, New Mexico, and just so you know, it has video. Late at night, an officer was watching surveillance cameras at the station, and this is what he saw. A figure walks through the sally port of the station parking lot. He checked and the sally port door never opened, and he couldn't find anyone in the parking lot. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 9. About 10 years ago, a couple repeatedly called police about hearing footsteps in their home in Imperial, Missouri. The responding officer had been there twice and found nothing, and figured the third time would be just the same. When he got there, he found an open sliding glass door, and something had set off the motion light. The officer looked all around the outside of the house and couldn't find any footprints in the snow that would have caused the motion light to be set off. As he interviewed the couple as to what happened, he heard creaking in the floorboards upstairs like someone was walking on them. He looked around again and couldn't find anything. The officer said, out of his 27 years of policing, it was the creepiest thing he had ever experienced. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 10. This is an audio recording from 1981 by a police officer who saw a UFO. Listen for yourself.
Yeah, all it is now is just an orange glow. That's all I can see. The sun's just coming up. Better not be. It's awful early. Early for the sun paper, Joe. I don't think the sun would just be in that one spot. It moved up to a higher vantage point, so you tell us what it does. Listen. Sounds like it's revving up its engines. Can you hear it?
Freaky. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 11. This one comes to us from a police officer in Nebraska, and let me tell you, this story freaked me out. One night the officer was checking on an abandoned house that was often hit by thieves who stole the copper wire inside. He checked on it twice that night. First time at 7 p.m., everything was fine. 2 hours later, he noticed an open back door, but he couldn't see any footprints in the snow. He told dispatch he was investigating the open door and he went inside. All of a sudden, he heard a thump come from upstairs, and he thought he heard the sound of kids playing. He went upstairs to investigate, and he heard the thump several more times, and the sound of laughter get stronger and stronger. He entered the bedroom where he heard the sounds, and didn't find anyone inside. What he did find, however, was a ripped out page of a children's book with the drawing of a police officer on it. He left the house, and he never went back. Like and follow for more. Scariest Things Police Have Seen, Part 12. This one is from my best friend who's also a cop. I'm going to read his report word for word. It's kind of silly, but kind of creepy too. I arrived on scene and immediately noticed a strange feel to the area. Numerous dogs were barking and a single loud howl echoed from somewhere nearby. With shivers running down my spine, I approached the incident location. I spoke to the reporting party through the door, who was terrified and refused to come out. He stated a dog, larger than he'd ever seen with blue glowing eyes, was tearing apart the fence outside of his bedroom window. On the east end of the property, I located numerous very large paw prints. At numerous points on the top of the 8-foot wood fence, there were bite and deep claw marks. The fence had been ripped apart in numerous spots. I am unaware of any animal that would be able to chew on the top of an 8-foot fence. At this time, it is unknown what caused the damage. I was unable to locate any animal matching the reporting party's description.